Recording. Glenn, welcome.
Hey, my friend.
Thank you, Scott. And the floor
Thank
is
you
yours.
thank you, Randy. Thank you so much, for inviting me back. It is such an important topic. That story you just shared, Randy. I mean, I've been on this platform for almost 10 years now, and the stories that I've heard over the years, similar or otherwise, um, it's just unbelievable. And it's not about paranoia, right? We don't want to make agents paranoid about this stuff, but at the same time, we absolutely have to raise awareness and educate and empower around this topic. There's, as an industry, we go and meet strange people at strange places. And, you know, when you say it like that, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And so, hopefully the goal is to help us think a little more intentionally and be a little more proactive about how we have some things in place to help keep us safe, and hopefully some protocols with multiple fail safes that in the worst case scenarios, we have a plan, a little bit of a plan. And that's really what it's all about. So thank you again for having me. Just really quickly, my name's Scott Deputy. I've been a licensed real estate agent since the 90s. So 27 years in the industry. I've been a practicing martial artist since 2006, a practicing martial arts instructor and self-defense instructor since 2013. And around about 2017, I was tasked by my local board of realtors to provide some self-defense training to the real estate membership in my area. That evolved over time to leading me to create the first of its kind safety and self-defense class that was approved for continuing education credits in my tri-state area. So Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. My course is approved for CEUs for license renewal at the state level. So I've been delivering that content since that time, locally, state level, regionally in my marketplace. I'm super thrilled that I got a direct message on Workplace just last week that they have asked me to lead a session at EXP in Miami. I'm so excited and over the moon about that opportunity. But in any case, I'm super passionate about helping educate agents around safety and building some awareness there. So thank you all for being here. And thank you again, Randy, for inviting me in. I really like for this to be more of a conversation. It's not so much of a presentation, but it's a conversation about some of these things that we come across. I have some resources that I'll share, absolutely. But would love to hear, has anyone else experienced something like what Randy described? Obviously, that was about as bad a situation as could even develop. And luckily, that agent trusted intuition. And that would be really the place to start when it comes to safety. We all have this gift, right? And it's science now. We know that it's science. It's not just a woo-woo topic, that intuition is a real thing, right? We're always sending and receiving energy, and intuition is a real gift, and we must honor that anytime. Anytime you have a sense, a sensation, a feeling, whether that's physical or just a thought, you always must honor that. So many times when we hear stories from victims, at some point in the recounting, they'll make mention that, I thought something might be wrong, or I felt something was off. And then they didn't honor that feeling and ended up, getting themselves entangled into that situation. So give that agent a lot of credit for honoring the intuition there and bringing a partner, bringing a safety buddy into the situation, so that they weren't there on their own, which could have been, obviously a worst case scenario there. So, but that said, anyone else have encountered any sort of situation where you were made to feel uncomfortable in this work?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm Dawn McSwain, and there's several times that I have not felt comfortable. And I always fail or try to fail on the side of safety. So I've probably lost out on a few things, but I'm alive to tell the stories. So,
Amen.
you know, when somebody wants to go look at a house, they've never met you before, they don't know you, they won't give you a pre-approval or proof of funds, and they want you to meet them at the house. And as soon as you say, well, I don't meet people, strangers at houses, and then they put up a fuss, then that's just a red flag, and I won't do it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good for you.
that's
Doug.
it.
Yeah.
And that's you know, aside from intuition, really step one is, again, creating these ground rules, these rules of engagement and setting expectation, right? What is it for you specifically, right? We get into real estate and we love to talk about how we're, you know, our own bosses and we're self-employed and all these great things, but then we forget to set our hours of operation and sort of set these rules of engagement so that we can take control of those expectations. Now, I feel like one of the few positives that have come out of the NAR settlement, in my opinion, is it's forcing a little more professionalism on the buyer side, right? And that's where a lot of the trouble occurs. It seems like when it comes to agent safety, is going to meet strange people in strange places, and it's the buyer expectation. I'm going to drop, you know, what I'm doing. I'm going to go to 123 Main Street for the showing. And we've got to slow that process down. We've got to have some barriers to entry, and then also be okay with what Don, I think was Don just shared. If they won't play by the rules, then they're not your people, right? Let them go. You know, we walk this tightrope of paychecks or safety, and it doesn't really need to be that, right? We can operate in this world just with just a little bit of time and attention and intention of saying, okay, if this, then that, right? And how am I going to engage people, and how am I going to set expectations? And I think that's a perfect example, right? We got to stop running out to open the door and get people to sit down face to face, or even on a Zoom call like this, where you can really have a thorough vetting of that prospect and get a sense of comfort and confirmation of identity and all of these things, right? And it doesn't have to be a TSA experience, right? It can be a normal, natural flow of building rapport and engagement. But at the same time, we're collecting a little more detailed information, verifying identity, and of course, let your lender partner do some of that heavy lifting, right? They've got to produce some proof of qualification, whether that's, as a cash buyer or as a finance buyer. But get them in front of that other set of eyes. They've got to confirm identity and provide a bunch of stuff, right? And so let the lender partners help. But with this NAR settlement on the buyer side, especially, right, we've got some paperwork that has to be signed before we're supposed to open any doors. And so why not just blame it on that, right? If you, up until this point, if you haven't been really good at sort of, getting that part of your business model in place, now just blame it on, the Department of Justice. Hey, I'm sorry, I can't just rush out and meet you. I'd love to show you the property, but first we have a few things we have to talk about and get straight. And then with that, you can be verifying identities, collecting identification. And then I always like to say, as a practice, assuming that they're well-meaning citizens, right? They're not evildoers of the world, but they're well-meaning, and you're going to have a successful interaction. Have a get to know you form or some document where, of course, you're verifying identification, but then also, show some interest in their situation, right? Around their family and their hobbies and other interests, right? Where we can hopefully build a client for life, and you can kind of commingle those two aspects, right? Where you're getting, of course, the safety piece checked off, but then, again, assuming a successful situation, you're also building that relationship over time to get a client for life, right? So that's really step one, is taking a little more time to verify IDs, vetting prospects, and meeting at a third-party place, whether it's virtually here on Zoom or at the Starbucks or some some third-party place that is not 123 Main Street and not where someone else may have the advantage of the terrain, right? So that's a big one, right? And combine those two aspects. And I think the same holds true on the seller side, right? So if we think about it, when it comes to a cold seller prospect, it can be the same kind of setup, right? We better be taking our time to verify some information on where we're going and who were you talking to, who engaged you for services. Verify that with your, your public records, your county records. And of course, as a professional, again, some of that work we should be doing anyway prior to an appointment in person is, looking for open permits or, checking, for floodplains or whatever other typical issues exist in your marketplace. Even on the seller side, we need to slow down. And I also encourage a seller side consult, right? Prior to going to that other property, have a Zoom call or have a meeting in a third party place where, again, you can sort of get to know someone and verify that they are who they say they are. Does anyone have, so we heard from Dawn on her one of her biggest practices. So I've asked, who's had a bad situation, but I also like to ask, does anyone else already have some things in place that they would like to share? What are your protocols, or do you have some safety things that you already have as a regular practice?
Scott, I try to, and I've talked to agents, I think this NAR thing, if there's one good thing about it, like you just mentioned, it does force you to sit down and have a discussion. It used to be first thing we do is meet them at the house, right? No questions asked. And I've had more than one agent, especially newer, that are so excited. And it seems to always be that remote vacant home, and we lose sometimes that, especially the exuberance of getting to show that first client. The newer agents I've found to be more susceptible that, sometimes people do have bad intentions, and we need to slow down. And well, another thing that I've talked to agents about is kind of say you're comfortable, or you've taken them out to a home, and just kind of the situational awareness of where your client is and you, and always having the access to getting out of the situation while you are showing a home, or even in an open home. And for many of you on the call, we had an agent and a lender, and luckily the lender was more experienced, but I don't know if he had necessarily bad intentions, but he was, I think, mentally challenged. A very big gentleman who came in the open house and didn't really have any intentions of leaving anytime soon, and made them very, very uncomfortable. And so if you could maybe just talk about some of the precautions when you are showing a home, even though you've vetted them, still about where you are as relationship to getting stuck with that person.
Yeah, it's a great point, Randy. And
one
Oop,
thing I won't do an open house by myself. And that is to protect me and to protect the sellers or the house, because people have been known to go into a house and unlock windows, come back later when nobody's around. But also, I sometimes, my husband does them. Yesterday, Janine did it. Thank you so much. And it's just the very minimum that you can do to protect everybody is have somebody else with you, because I've heard horror stories where somebody comes into an open house and we don't have a ton of people coming through. They lock the door behind them, and now you're in a vacant house with some guy, girl, whatever, that has bad intentions. So I try to do everything so nothing bad happens, so you don't ever have to deal with that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's great. I have a few things I want to touch on with open houses specifically. But Randy, just to circle back to what you had mentioned there from a situational awareness standpoint, 100% agree, right? There's some things, especially when I'm focused on the self-defense aspect of it. One of the first pieces is don't let people be that close, right? You need to have some time to be able to sense, but then also to respond and react, right? If you're going to be in a situation where you might have to protect yourself. And so having some strategy or intention around how you move through properties with people, I think, is an important consideration that you bring up. First and foremost, of course, they always go first, right? It's always after them, right? You always keep yourself between them and the exit, whether that's room to room or the actual, exit of the home or the property. But they always go first. And so I hear a lot sometimes from the ladies that, sometimes you gotta sort of force that because you might be with someone who's pretending to be gentlemanly, right? You're like, no, 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 after you, of course, after you, right? And while usually that is a politeness, it can be used as a tactic, right? No, no, after you. And then now you've gone in and cornered yourself. And so even if they bristle a little bit or say no after you, ladies first, you have to be mindful enough to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm working here, please, after you, I want you to see this property. I'm not going to demonstrate it, whatever the language is for you that's comfortable, right? But always keeping them in the rooms first. And then a big one that I get, Randy, a lot on the showing side is, do you lock the door or not lock the door once you're inside? Right? And there's no right or wrong to that answer, by the way. But I do think it's important for each one of us to think about it and then think about if you make a decision, then why? What is that for you? So, and I've heard everything under the sun with these situations. And obviously, a reason that you would leave it unlocked would be speed of exit, right? If you were in a situation that was uncomfortable inside the home, you want to reduce the friction to be able to get out quickly. So that would be one consideration. The flip side of that, of course, is that now as you progress throughout your showing, you might lose sight of that point of entry and someone else could enter behind you that was not welcome, right? And so that's the other consideration. Again, you just need to think it through, or maybe it's case by case, right? Depends on the situation at hand, where the property is. But you can make an argument for either one. And so I think it's just incumbent on each one of us to take some time and sit, for 20 minutes or 30 minutes with your notes and just think about, what is typical in my day-to-day as a real estate agent, and then what are some things that could come up and how am I going to handle that, right, proactively, so you're not caught in the moment of surprise and forced to make a decision under stress, right? And you get some control back there. So I think it's a great point, Randy. But even inside, as they're going first, stay 2-3 arm lengths away from people, right? That's not enough to make it so far that you have to raise your voice to have a conversation, but it's far enough away where you have time to move or react if you're feeling uncomfortable. So I say at least 3 arm lengths away as you navigate. And then last piece on that would be, you can use the terrain a little bit to your advantage, right? If it's, again, if it's not a vacant home, there's some furnishings and things you can use, the table, the sofa, the kitchen peninsula, keep those things in between you and them, right? So if they were going to try to get to you, they got to take the long way, right? And it gives you a little more time to exit the situation. And so just having an awareness around that, right? And that's all sort of grouped under situational awareness, but it's also a little bit of terrain awareness and notice, where you are in relation, to some of these things. So I think that's a great point. But yes, just don't let people get that close. And last to that point, Randy, as you mentioned, that maybe someone was just mentally imbalanced, they weren't necessarily a predator type situation. But I have heard over the years multiple times that some of the incidences were not with strangers, right? It was not a cold prospect, right? And so even when it's someone that right, or a past client, it's not enough to let your guard down, right? And so keep that distance and keep that space. And last but not least, I know I said that once already, but one thing I heard about that specifically from one of the resources that EXP used at an event prior, when you have that little bit of distance, you're able to use a little bit of sign language too. If you start to feel uncomfortable, right, you can start to give the stop sign, right? Excuse me, if you wouldn't mind, right? And if you're putting the stop sign up, any well-meaning citizen is going to honor it, right? It's red light, green light, and you're going to like freeze or even back up, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't, and now their hands are up, right? And they're stepping back maybe, right? If you give that kind of signal, if someone proceeds through your stop sign, they've declared their intention, right? They've given you a clear communication that something is wrong and they have a bad intention, right? So I thought that was a really great way to articulate that. But again, when you have that kind of distance, you have a chance to give a stop sign. And if they go through it, you need to be ready for action. And then, so let's move to the open house. It sounds like, you have some open house activity in your marketplace, which is great. 100% agree with what Dawn said. Please do not do your open houses alone ever again. If you have in the past, please stop that practice immediately. It's too easy to have a safety partner for your open house, whether it's a lender partner, some other affiliated vendor partner, or if it has to be a friend or family member, right? They don't have to be licensed to be with you at your open house. They just need to be another set of eyes and ears. If it's a non-licensed person, no problem. They can't engage in real estate conversation, but they can certainly still direct traffic and then keep an eye on you. And also, to Dawn's point, the seller's personal property, if it's an occupied property. So don't do them alone. Find your partner, whether it's a colleague, fellow agent, a new agent, a mentor agent, vendor partner. There's too many ways now to find someone to come along to be a part of that. And in my opinion, it allows, when you have a partner, an open house partner, it gives you an opportunity to maybe level up your open house game, right? Because a solo agent just sort of fielding people as they come through, it can be hard depending on your personality to really have an engaging conversation with people. And so having another person that you're already sort of engaging with and change up the conversation, maybe take the one-on-one pressure off of that prospect who's coming in the door, right? There, it's the retail salesperson experience, right? Oh no, we just want to look, right? Now, if you have something that's more engaging and it's not so one-on-one, then it can let people let their guard down. But then also you can have, when it comes to vendor partners, level up the experience with like a raffle type situation, which will also force registration, right? For people to provide accurate information, because of course I want to win, right? If we're having a giveaway, I want to win. So let me actually give you my name and email address, that's accurate. And so you can leverage a vendor partner for whatever that prize is, right? Whether that's a gift card or some electronic, but like now you have something, again, you can start conversation, but you also have a way to sort of force registration where, if you sign in here, we're going to choose a name at the end of the open house and we'll reach out to you if you're the winner, right? And you can sort of up your game there, but you can leverage a vendor partner for that. And of course, let them use their marketing dollars to fund that giveaway, right? Or the cookies or the refreshments, whatever you got going on there. But you can level up that experience. And again, you're combining that with a safety measure where you don't have to be there all by yourself. Another strategy I like for open houses specifically is having prominent signage that says that the property is under video surveillance inside and out. And it doesn't matter if it does or it doesn't. Right? And by the way, as we all know, most of them are at this point, whether your client has told you or they haven't. There's probably a camera somewhere, hidden in the plant or whatever, but someone's watching, someone's listening to whatever's happening in there. But I think it makes a wonderful psychological deterrent to have something near the front of the property a little, tent sign that says, this property is monitored by video surveillance, and it could be just enough for someone to change their mind if they had bad intentions.
Mm.
Apologize, my four-legged has something to say there.
He's in agreement.
Yeah, I think he's shouting it out.
That's right.
So yeah, so don't do it alone. And then I do think as a membership, we can do better at again, you can meter the attendance. So it sounds like the couple of recent experiences, maybe it was sort of modest traffic, right? But that's not always the case. Sometimes you got a hot one, or it's in a place where there's a lot more population close by. Why should it just be an open house, right? Where people can come in as many at a time, right? Why not have a situation where you sort of meter the walkthroughs, one, maybe two parties at a time, so that you don't have this influx of 10 parties where you can't possibly keep track of who got where, who, did someone, unlock windows, as Don mentioned? Are they rummaging personal property? Like, you just can't keep track of that. So again, I believe personally that if we can just practice that script a little bit, you could create a ground rule that says, hey, look at, and you could blame it on the seller. When in 2020, my state was still open for business. I don't know how it was for you guys in Washington, but we were open, but then they had guidelines for how many people could be in a property at a time, including the open houses, right? And so we just blamed it on that. So you can always blame it on the seller, your broker, like put the onus on someone else and just say, I'm sorry, but this is what the seller requires, or this is what my broker requires. We can only allow two parties at a time. If you wouldn't mind, we'll be right with you. Right? Whatever it is for you, right? But we just got to flex that muscle a little bit, get comfortable with those kind of interactions. And for people that bristle, to Dawn's point again, let them go. Like, hey, make an appointment. You can, my number's on the sign, or if you have an agent that you're working with, please have them get in touch with me, come back another time. Sorry. But it's okay. It's okay to just let them go or turn them away. It's just not worth it. Right. And then, of course, situational awareness at your open houses, I think, is also relevant, right? Is keeping your distance and spacing. And then regarding personal property, I led a conversation about a year ago at the state level that was called Guns, Drugs, and Open Houses, which I thought was pretty clever. But what this was is they brought in some resources at the state level to talk about the opioid epidemic and the prescription drug crisis that we're experiencing as a nation, right? And it was a reminder that with your seller clients, when you're exposing that property to the buying public, there's some extra considerations in our modern world, right? And one of the biggest ones, of course, is prescription medication, because people that are unfortunately in an addicted situation, they'll go to any measure, right? And open houses or property showings is one of those measures where they might find, get a lucky find, in the medicine cabinet. So we've got to be asking that question as a listing agent, as part of your, interview. You need to be asking, we got to make sure that all the prescription medication is disappeared and in a non-obvious place as we go through this process. And then the other part of that was the guns, right? And so I think it's been pretty common for us to think about the drug situation. But another equally as important question to ask in that interview is, by the way, are there firearms present in your property, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? And if the answer is yes, then the follow-up question is, are those firearms properly secured, in a safe or, some situation that a member of the public couldn't have access to it? And if the answer to that question is no, then we've got to move to the next part of that conversation. But again, worst case scenarios is you've got this beautiful listing and there's a sidearm in the shoebox in the closet, and a worst case scenario can develop there, right? Whether that's a youth getting their hands on it that shouldn't because they were unattended at the open house or the showing, or an evildoer strategically was on the hunt, right? They were looking, they were going to open houses, they were looking for opportunities where they could check and see if they could find something that wasn't secured and then go and, God forbid, use it in some other crime, right? So I think that's an important consideration. And a couple extra questions at the bottom of the list, right? How long have you lived here? What have you done? Right? What do you love about it? By the way, do you have firearms present in the property? And if the answer to that is yes, then we've got to just make sure they're secured. And there are resources available, which I learned at that particular conversation. There are resources at the state and county level for storage lockers and gun storage, free resources. So you might look into that where you guys are to see if there are resources like that, and that could be a useful thing to provide to a client potentially. So yeah, so let me share. I want to share a couple things, and I'm happy to field a question, or if someone else has something else they want to share as a protocol that they have in place. But again, this is more of a conversation than a presentation. I love to hear your feedback or questions as we go along. The mastermind is always more powerful than the presenter.
Yeah, I just really,
Well,
I would like to share
that's
something.
it.
I just really like
Yeah.
the idea of the buddy system. I think that's really important because when I first started off, I was this eager real estate agent. I went to this isolated for sale by owner. I was like, I'm going to get this listing. So we walked around the property on the outside, and then it was time to go inside. And I was like, this is just weird. Something just doesn't feel right. Luckily, at that time, I still had my dog, and I said, if I'm gonna come in the house, but only if my dog can come. And he looked at me like, you're not taking your dog in here. And I'm like, I'm very sorry. That's just a part of me. That's what I do. And if that doesn't work, then we can sit on the porch and have a conversation. And my dog was in the car there. You could see him. And yeah, we did not go inside, and then we left. But it was a feeling, it was that same feeling. But then I got smarter, just like Dawn said, always have someone come with you. So I really like that buddy system.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's
Dogs
an
are
easy
wonderful.
thing.
Dogs, yes.
Well,
And my
you know,
dog was
just
big and black with one tooth missing, so it was just perfect.
yes,
Nice,
exactly.
perfect.
Just
Yeah,
a side note, I got a kind of a gray black bigger dog, and the plan was to take her with me on showings and this and that, and we got her home, and I mean, I fell in love with her, and she's still with us today, but she immediately threw up in the car. So she did not work out as a guard dog, but yeah,
Family
good.
dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I love that you honored that intuition, Janine. That that's so important, right? Anytime we have that feeling, you gotta honor it and get out. Um, and yes, the buddy system, right? There's no reason why you can't make that comfortable, right? If it's a listing appointment, hey, look, this is a new agent in our area. I'm just mentoring a little bit, and I wanted to invite her or him along, to sort of shadow, or I'm still sort of new in the business. This is one of my business partners who has a little more experience than I thought she'd be a great resource. He or she would be a great resource to come along and get a look at your wonderful property. Like there's a way to get comfortable with these conversations. And again, it's just we gotta move that muscle a little bit and get comfortable, but there's no reason to put yourself on an island for this work. There just is no reason. And it can't be stressed enough that it's buyer sides, listing sides, open houses, everything needs to be, you need to have some intentional ground rules of engagement. One of the resources I like to share, I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, Randy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the resources I like to share is the agent facing website from the National Association of Realtors. So there's a resource called NAR.realtor. If you're not familiar with that resource, it really is a wonderful collection of information for agents, whether that's for education, business, marketing, you name it. They've got a wealth of resources here, and including a good bit of information around agent safety. And I reference this a lot. Anytime I teach a class, I reference this website, and it's NAR.realtor/safety, gets you right to the safety resources. And there are pages and pages of information here. I encourage everyone to bookmark this and get a look and sort of review this after our conversation today, because one of my biggest frustrations as a realtor safety advocate is that I go and I teach these classes, and now I've been doing it long enough where locally I see people again, they're back to my class, right? It's another renewal cycle. They're back. Some people 2, 3, 4 times at this point. And I say, well, hey, thank you so much for coming back. That's awesome. I'm glad this was a worthwhile class. Tell me one thing that you put in place after our last class together. And then the head goes down. And I think, oh my gosh, we had these light bulbs and this interaction and these ideas, and then you didn't implement one thing. Nothing changed in those 2 years since you saw me. And so please don't let that be you. Please just find one thing that you can implement, whatever that is for you. It should be multiple things, of course. But back to the resource here, there's a bunch of things, resources, mental wellness toolkit even. But a couple things that I want to share here. I won't run the video. There's a handful of videos here which are great. See if I can find it. Where did it go? All right, I don't see the one I was looking for, but there. So the video I was looking for, which I know is here somewhere, it's just not on this exact page, but NAR created a cartoon video. It's about 5 minutes long, and it's consumer facing. And basically what it does is it lays out the expectations for the consumer to say, hey, when you work with a real estate agent, here are some things you can expect, right? And it's a cartoon form, and it covers the gambit of, not seeing properties after dark, or extra caution around vacant properties, open house sign-ins, not riding together in the same car, like all these little day-to-day things that we sometimes take for granted, but it's a great educational piece for the consumer to proactively set expectations and say, this is how it's going to go, right? When you work with a real estate agent, these are the way, the rules of engagement. And so it's cute. I think they did a really nice job producing it, and it didn't get widely shared, I don't think. So you could take that resource, right, and you could add it or use it as a introductory resource, right, as it is off the shelf. But I think it's an even better idea to sort of rip off and duplicate, right? So they gave us the framework. And so especially in our modern video age that we all know we're supposed to be doing more and more video, how easy would it be to create your own video, right? With you talking, branded to you, with your unique value proposition, all the wonderful things about you, and getting started with a new prospect, and also adding in, by the way, here's some things you can expect when you're working with me, right? I work Monday through Saturday. Sundays I reserve for my family. I don't show properties after dark because we can only see half of the property and we would only have to revisit anyway. I don't go in attics, basements, whatever it is for you, right? You can add all of those things, and again, sort of commingle it with the friendly part of it while you set expectations to say, look, this is my business, and this is how I do it. And this is what I expect from you as well, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer Seller. And so I think it's a wonderful idea. You can brand it, and create something that's short and sweet. And then whenever you have a new prospect, you could shoot that off in in an email or a text message and say, hey, here's something really quick. I would love for you to take a look at this as we get started on this journey together. Right? It can really set the expectation.
Great idea.
Let's see. I'm gonna go back one here. Another thing I wanted to point out as well, Randy, is they have a nice list here of personal protection resources. And so this is something that I'm really big on now as well, that I found that a lot of agents don't have a lot of awareness around. There's so much great technology available now to help keep us safe. Whether that's in the form of identity verification, tracking apps, you name it. There's a variety of things available now. So I would encourage everyone to do a little shopping around personal safety technology, right? I see some things in the chat. Janine, before you leave, one thing I want to share on these resources really quickly, because this is probably the most important, is a wearable safety technology that's basically a security system for your body, right? And this is a brand that I really recommend. It's called InvisiWare. But what you'll notice is InvisiWare, all of their products have this pendant, and this pendant has a panic button on the back of it, and it pairs with your phone via Bluetooth. And it basically is, again, it's a panic button like a home security system. If you had an intruder at your home, you would hit that panic button and it would send a call for help. This InvisiWare jewelry is one example of something that you can wear as a pendant, as a keychain, as a bracelet. It pairs with your phone, and for $15 a month, you can have this security, and we have the recording, so she can come back to this. But this is an important resource. And again, when it comes to an assault situation or a self-defense situation, Randy, the seconds matter, right? I need to get a call for help as soon as possible. And so,
Wow.
The 911 can be a non-useful resource in a situation like that, because you've got to get the call, you've got to answer the questions, right? You don't have time, right? You don't have time for any of that. And so this, and it's monitored by ADT, as a matter of fact, speaking of home security. But when you have the annual or the monthly membership for 24/7 monitoring, it's monitored by ADT. And so if you're in a situation, you hit the button, it gets the call for help. They can use the GPS in your phone for location services, right? So they can get you help faster. And this is one of the great examples of a technology product like this. And it comes in all, let me just get to the product page so you can kind of see, right? They've got all different things, from necklaces to bracelets to keychains, even, for us guys, if you don't want something that looks too much like jewelry, let me just get this over here. You can get a keychain, but you notice every one of the products has the pendant, and the pendant is where the panic button is housed. And so you can always get to it in an instant, right? And so I'm a huge advocate for all of us to have something like this as part of our, tools of the trade. Now, of course, this is not just for real estate agents, right? The use cases for something like this is for everyone, right? Do you have kids? Do you have elderly parents? Do you exercise in the world on your own? Like, are you a biker, jogger, hiker, right? You should have something like this. And it's not just for personal protection. It's, what if you're in an accident, right? One of the videos they have on this website for their product is a woman that was in a vicious, rollover car accident. She was pinned in the car. The phone was God knows where, right? Because they had rolled and it, it was tossed. And she had an InvisiWare necklace, and it saved her life. They were able to get to her in time. It was a jaws of life situation. They had to, cut the car open, but it literally saved her life. And that's another example of how the seconds matter, and you can get a call for help out as soon as possible. So I encourage everyone to look into something like this and get it for your whole family, quite frankly. But even for myself, someone that is pretty confident and comfortable in a self-defense scenario, I would rather call for help first and then deal with what I got to deal with, so that they know that I was the victim.
Yeah.
whether it looks like that or not when they get there, that who knows. But I want them to know that I was the victim. And so I think this is a wonderful example of a technology resource. But again, back on the NAR site, you can see that there's a handful of things that they've cataloged here, and there's descriptions, for each item there where you can get a little deeper in the application and what the service actually is. But in my opinion, above all else, having that wearable safety technology where you can get a call for help out in an instant is the most important thing, right? We can do all the vetting and all the things, but we could still find ourselves in a situation where someone's trying to get their hands on you that shouldn't. And in that moment, you need to be able to get that call for help out immediately so that help can be on the way. And then you can figure out, how am I going to handle myself in this situation, exit, defend, whatever that is at that point. So those
Yeah,
are a
that's
couple of resources I like to share there. You know, and hopefully everyone took note of that and can revisit and kind of refresh and say, what did we talk
Yeah.
about again? But there's so much information there. It's really great. And so.
Well, that's I didn't know about that. That's really great information. This is recorded. I'll send it out to the group and for all of you on to be able to listen to again. And you're getting a bunch of thank yous, Scott. I sure appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Nothing more important than agent safety.
That's it. It's what you can't put a price on your life, right? And so with just a little bit of intention, you know, my continuing education class is about 3.5 hours long. So there's a lot of material that we could continue on the conversation. I know we don't have time for that today, but that's how much there is to talk about on this topic, right? And that's how many different scenarios we could talk about, right? Because you can't even make it up, some of the things that have occurred. And so what I love about having it be more conversational is that it's not just me saying, it's your colleague saying, this happened to me. And that's another big part of this, Randy, by the way, that as a membership, we also don't do a good enough job of reporting, right? These incidents, when one of us experiences anything, even if we got out of it, it needs to be reported back to the broker. It needs to be reported back to the association level so that communication can be widely broadcast to help your colleagues stay out of that. You know, don't let them be the one. And then also, as a membership, maybe we catch a criminal, right? Because now you have all these eyes and ears out in the field, you know, and now they're alerted on high alert and they know what the scenario was. If they're the next one to get the call, they can, you know, get the authorities involved faster. And so it's so important to communicate. If you're ever involved in a situation that's uncomfortable, report it back to your broker level, report it back to your local association so that the memberships can be informed, so our colleagues can be informed. You know, the incidence of events is much higher than we'd like to talk about, quite frankly. And NAR does survey the membership on an annual basis. And usually, you know, the respondents is north of 25% of us on an annual basis have been in some situation, right? But what percentage of those were actually reported, you know, sometime near when it occurred is very minimal. And so that's another piece of awareness that I really like to raise with everyone is, if by chance, you know, you are involved in something unfortunate, please report it. Or if you know someone, if you have a friend or colleague that has an incident, please report it at the highest level so that we can all be educated and informed and maybe catch that criminal.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Well, Scott, thank you. We'll close. Is there any last comments or questions? I sure appreciate it, Scott. There's such great awareness and great information that we'll get out there. Thank you for helping.
Thank
My
you,
pleasure,
Scott.
Randy. Thanks. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Randy. It means a lot, you know, that you would bring me on to this call. I don't take that lightly, and hopefully gave some value today.
Sure
And
did.
just a reminder, go back to the website, get your personal safety technology. And then for anyone coming to Miami, I hope to see you in Miami, meet you in person. And I'm teaching on that Tuesday afternoon as my realtor safety class.
Congratulations. Well deserved. Thank you,
Awesome.
Scott.
Thank you. All
Appreciate
right.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Take care.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.